everybody, and welcome back to the United Stand. It is the B&B show. We are joined with Ben Jacobs, transfer expert and fantastic journalist, on the show to speak all things Manchester United and hopefully put a smile back on all of our faces. Ben, welcome to the show. How are you?
Can't promise that. I don't think I've ever put a smile on anybody's faces, particularly not football fans. And yeah, after that Everton loss, I think a few Manchester United fans are quite downbeat at the moment, unfortunately. Yes,
I'm one of them, and there is quite a few in the chat as well. As you can understand, it was a really, really poor performance and a really frustrating loss, and that's to put it in a polite way. But you have put smiles on our faces all throughout the transfer window, and I'm hoping so today as well. Don't put yourself down, Ben. Do not do that. But look, we've got loads to get into. We're going to talk about Ruben Amorim, January transfer window, a little bit of background on Manchester United's new... Ben, take the words out of my mouth.
Carl McCauley's appointment. Senior Scouting Lead, or Head of Senior Scouting as his official title is.
Exactly, and loads more as well. Get your questions in, let us know your thoughts, get your super chats in. If you have any questions for Ben, let me know. Smash a like on the video, but I want to get into it. My first question, Ben, is a little bit about Ruben Amorim. Now, I don't want to be seen on the show to be immediately putting pressure on a Man United manager every time they lose a game or they have a poor performance. But with Ruben Amorim, if you do look at the stats, if you look at the win ratio, if you look at the win percentage, if you look at the fact he's won 12 Premier League games in a year now, I know publicly Sir Jim has massively backed Amorim, but is there any raising pressure behind the scenes on Ruben Amorim, considering the wins just aren't consistent enough?
Yeah, we know there was pressure ahead of that October international break, and they ended up beating Sunderland and it alleviated it. Then they went on this run, but you can't have pressure in early October and then it just totally dissipates because it's Manchester United. I come back to what I've reported before, that if Ruben Amorim can get through the festive period, all signs are he'll be given the full season. Whether or not it's 3 years, as Sir Jim Ratcliffe had suggested, remains to be seen. I don't think you can say any manager in the Premier League is going to get 3 years, particularly not at a Big Six club. You look at Liverpool and Arne Slot, and there's been backing for him. They're the defending Premier League champions, but they're on a bad run. And again, some suggest pressure might be growing there, but we have to ultimately respect the fact that right now Manchester United want it to work with Ruben Amorim, and they did turn a corner after beating Sunderland. For me, and this is why I've always said the festive fixtures, because that's mid-December, early January, the window opens, you start to understand what you're heading towards for the season. And crucially, before those games kick in, there's a kinder, if you can say that in Premier League terms, run of fixtures. So Everton, they would have expected to beat against 10 men. They didn't, hence the meltdown from some fans. Crystal Palace away, not easy, but Manchester United will still feel they can get something from the game. And then home to West Ham, away at Wolves, home to Bournemouth, before you get into those festive fixtures. And I think if Ruben Amorim can keep the run going, bar Everton, into that away game against Aston Villa, he will get minimum the entire season. But obviously, if Manchester United go away at Palace and lose, don't get a victory against West Ham, and then potentially hand Wolves their first win of the season, you start to think, wait a minute, he's back where he started, building up to that Sunderland game again. So I think it's quite a fluid situation, if I'm absolutely honest. And I think Manchester United need to cash in and capitalise from the fact that certainly those games against West Ham at home and away at Wolves should be winnable and must be winnable if Manchester United are to make a push for any form of Champions League football.
Yeah, and that Champions League football is so important. And we're going to speak a little bit about transfers later. But if you want to attract the best players, and I know we got Cunha and Mbeumo in the summer and that was brilliant, but if you do want to attract the best players, you one, need the money from Champions League, and two, you need to be able to offer Champions League football. I mean, we will talk about that, but just a little bit on Ruben Amorim, just to kind of further on that, do you think that Sir Jim and Ineos maybe want to give him a little bit more time because he is their guy that they appointed? I mean, they want to be seen to be right, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you have to back who you appointed. And what we know is that after deliberation and kind of U-turning on the Erik ten Hag decision, stability is seen as key to the project. And Manchester United still look at kind of smaller metrics that all suggest that Manchester United have made improvement under Ruben Amorim, even if the results across his entire tenure don't suggest that. For example, big chances created, or an improvement in XG, or just the fact that now he's had an off-season with the players and the new season allows for momentum and to draw a line under last campaign, plus the fact that the new signings have to some extent settled in. You add all of that up, and I still think Manchester United's reticence over doing anything regarding Ruben Amorim is just about the fact that there hasn't been that one period of stability. Amorim joining without an off-season, dreadful in the Premier League last campaign, and then you head into a new summer, a lot of new signings, some of them got injured, then they came back. And I think there was a feeling of vindication from within Old Trafford after Sunderland leading up towards Everton, which is why there's such a disappointment that they couldn't get 3 points against 10 men, because if they'd have beaten Everton, and resoundingly so, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I think that's a very underrated point, that a club like Manchester United can lose a game and everyone goes back to the same conversation as before Sunderland. But imagine if they'd have beaten Everton 3-0, then we'd be now at this point in this show probably saying Manchester United is still unbeaten. They've got a great opportunity with kinder fixtures heading towards the festive period. So they're one game away sometimes from disaster, Manchester United, but they're also one win away from people getting really excited about the league table and where things are at. And that's why I think that at this stage, the Manchester United hierarchy, including Jim Ratcliffe, will be a bit reticent about being trigger happy. But of course, if Everton leads to Palace, West Ham, Wolves, all resulting in Manchester United not picking up 3 points, you are back where you started. But if they win those games, then suddenly a lot of the fuss over Everton may disappear very quickly. And the upside for Manchester United, I think, is that the Premier League table is so tight. So yes, they're back in 10th on 18 points, but they are also only 3 points of Champions League football. And I would wager, were they to win the 3 games that are coming up next that I mentioned, they'll head into the festive period in the top 5 and in a Champions League spot. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it's just a fascinating and crucial point of the season, because usually we say the festive period is about defining your season. And once it's over, you can basically tell, are we a Premier League contender? Are we in the mix for Champions League football? Or are we in mid-table mediocrity or worse? But right now, I think it's actually the pre-festive fixtures that are going to clarify the table. And once they're over and we get into late December, I think it'll be obvious if Manchester United are in the European picture or for Champions League football, or if actually they're going to be back where they are at the moment in the table, which is right in the middle. And that will be disappointing to the fan base and no doubt the hierarchy as well. So I think we need to be a bit patient, and I think the hierarchy will share this belief. But one thing's for sure, once you pass that Wolves game, if results haven't improved, then pressure will once again ramp up on Ruben Amorim.
Do you know what, Ben? I love your optimism, and I really hope that we can get through this festive period with points on the board in and around them Champions League places. I'd love nothing more. A lot of ifs though, and for me there's just been too many of them results. Everton, Grimsby, the Europa League final, where I just think to myself, how are we really going to kick on? But I hope we do. I really, really, really hope we do. And
yeah, but I think like a lot of Manchester United fans may share your belief, but once you string a run of games together, everyone sort of does start to see the bigger picture. So it's clear when Manchester United click, goals are not going to be a problem. Even now, they've scored 19 in the Premier League. That's more than Villa and Crystal Palace, who are in 2 of the likely 5 UCL spots. They are ahead of Liverpool, albeit now we start to realise that's partially because Liverpool have made a really disappointing start to the season. But when you have must-win games or matchups, particularly at Old Trafford, against sides that are struggling, this, and that's what I mean in my last answer, is the crucial period before the festive games start. Because if they beat a West Ham at home and win away at Wolves, then in likelihood they'll head into the festive period right in the mix for Champions League football, because the table is so tight. But if you flip it and look at those 19 goals conceded, Manchester United are 10th in the table at the moment. It's only Bournemouth above them with a worse defensive record, but you can go below them to sides that have conceded 19 goals or more. And it's basically all the teams in and around the relegation zone. Nottingham Forest, for example, who are only just above it, I think, to Brentford, and Liverpool below Manchester United as well. So they've basically got the attack of a side that could qualify for the Champions League, but the defence at the moment, statistically, I mean, of a team that are down there in the doldrums. And they've got to find a way of just balancing it, scoring a few more goals, conceding a few less goals. Great opportunity to do that away at Palace, home to West Ham, away at Wolves. And if that is the case and they get those points in the bag, then, as I say, the table is tight enough that as we enter the festive period, they'll be back in the hunt for Champions League football and the fan base can be a bit calmer once again.
I hope so, Ben, and I'll be asking you for your Palace prediction at the end of the show, so let's see what you say to that one. I next wanted to ask you, Ben, in order to get consistency, which is exactly what we need, we do need to recruit more, and whether that happens in January or that happens in the summer, we will talk about that. But we have brought somebody in to help us with that, Kyle McCauley, Head of Senior Scouting. Can you give us a bit of background on him, Ben?
Yeah, so Kyle McCauley has traditionally throughout his career followed Graham Potter everywhere. But
does that tell me that Graham Potter's coming to United?
Yeah, and I think Graham Potter is not going to be the next manager of Manchester United. That's the first thing to say. But what's interesting is as Graham Potter has struggled in jobs, Kyle McCauley has often lingered on in a job when Potter left. And his value is seen as very high. And over time, because Graham Potter hasn't lasted at places and has now gone to Sweden, and McCauley coming to Manchester United, they've kind of separated. So if you look at Brighton first, they both worked together with a lot of successes. And the reason why that dynamic worked is because McCauley took a lot of the recruitment meetings, particularly in forward planning, that Potter didn't have the time to take or trusted McCauley to be in, and therefore delegated. Then they both moved to Chelsea, and obviously Christopher Vivell was at Chelsea, and there was some overlap. And this is why Vivell has been quite important in bringing McCauley to Manchester United, but it is still a hierarchy decision rather than specifically Vivell. And what a lot of clubs, West Ham as well, when he was there briefly, like about McCauley is that he's kind of a chief scout, and he's very good at forward planning, and he's got huge expertise at finding young talents in particular from emerging regions, and he's got a strong contact book in Europe as well. But he also fulfills in part the role, even though he won't have the title at Manchester United, of a technical director as well. So he's part of a lot of the forward planning. He's part of a lot of the unsung work that allows clubs to move early in windows and win races where maybe you need a strong pitch to the player and you have to build a relationship with the family as well. And McCauley spends a lot of time getting FaceTime in the field as a result. And when you finally get a signing, especially at a big club like Manchester United, people tend to assume player just wanted Manchester United. But naturally, it's about things like, is there a pathway if it's a younger player or somebody coming from abroad? And also, what's it actually going to be like? Who are the other players? What's the dressing room culture? What are the training facilities like? And for that, your regional scouts, or in this case, your head of senior scouting, is so important. And what McCauley will do at Manchester United is fulfill some of that forward planning role and also run the network of Manchester United's existing international scouts and make sure that they're coordinated, that they are forward planning, that they're using data, and that the pitch is ultimately as consistent as possible about what this new Manchester United project is all about. And even though I said it's not just a Vivell hire, McCauley's boss will be Vivell. They've worked together before. They were at Chelsea between 2022 and 2023 when Vivell was technical director. And I think that's important because now Vivell is above a technical director and McCauley, like I say, will fulfill some of those roles. So you've got good chemistry between Vivell and McCauley. The hierarchy buy into the fact that he's got an excellent eye for talent, and hopefully over time his appointment will help Manchester United unearth some younger players from all over the world, but also forward plan So their business in windows is more structured and some of it is done earlier.
Nice one. Thank you, Ben. Very, very interesting. Hopefully that helps, because we know that we need to get better at recruitment. That is something that I believe has started to happen under Ineos, but we can get much better, and especially with the forward planning side of things. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. We have got some super chats coming in, so I'm going to get through them now, Ben, before we move on to other topics in the show. And a lot of them are topics I wanted to cover anyway, so why not go to the chat for this? So the first one is from Slow Sports News. He has said, Ben, is there any movement on potential short-term solutions in the middle, like loan options, if the main midfield targets aren't available?
Yeah, I think we have to repeat what we've said on the show before, and now it has widespread media. There was an excellent piece from Rob Dawson, I believe it was, outlining Manchester United's 7 midfield targets, some of which are available in January and others in the summer. And if you've been following this show, many of the names I've reported myself already. So João Gomez, Conor Gallagher, the more feasible targets in January. Conor Gallagher might still have to be a permanent signing, but I would imagine that Manchester United, if they choose to go in that direction, will lean on Atleti to see whether a loan with a buy option is possible. And of course, that means they can still keep the door open to 2 midfielders in the summer, because a loan with a try before you buy type option, or even just a straight loan, might suit Gallagher to give him the game time, might give Manchester United an extra body. But then if they don't want to move forwards beyond the summer, you're not committed to anything, so you leave the door open to still try and add 2 other names. And I think this is why, if Manchester United chose Conor Gallagher, I would personally be surprised, speaking to sources, if they put down the 50 to 55 million euros necessary to sign him permanently. But if Atletico Madrid decide, okay, if you're going to pay 100% of the wage with a buy option, you can have him in January on an initial loan, you never know. That might suit all parties. João Gomez is an interesting one, and we won't know the true reality until January. But as you can imagine, if you get particularly to the late part of January and Wolves look dead and buried, they might be tempted to cash in a little bit earlier, knowing that people would lowball them in the summer if they go down. And almost certainly João Gomez and Jurgen Strand-Larsen will leave Wolves if they get relegated. I would actually say not almost certainly, but definitely. I'm like 99.9% sure that none of those players will stay through the Championship. So Wolves, if they're aware of that and they think they're heading down, but we won't know until January, could be tempted to do business in January for João Gomez. I think less so Jurgen Strand-Larsen, a slightly higher number. We've heard reports that that number might be 44 million. I'm not so sure. I think 50 million or maybe even higher with add-ons is probably the ballpark. So those 2 in January, and then it's the same old suspects for the summer. Carlos Baleba, in many ways a dream target for Manchester United. Let's see what the price is. I don't think there'll be a clear direction of travel there until March or April next year. Adam Wharton, we'll have to see if he signs a new contract at Crystal Palace first. You'll get a lot of speculation, but wait for that part of the puzzle first, because it's all very well speculating over a potential move and a price. But if in January, February, March, he suddenly signs a new deal, then maybe that takes the potential for a summer move off the table. I think the other thing I'm told with Adam Wharton is that he's more in that category like Liam Delap, of players that wants to leave Crystal Palace for Champions League football. So if Manchester United can get it this season, it would put them in a stronger position. Angelo Stiller, like I've said before, does have a release clause, but Stuttgart can pay 2 million euros to override it, and then he'd be available for a higher price, possibly somewhere in the region of 55 to 65 million pounds if the release clause isn't in play. And then, of course, there's Elliot Anderson as well, another player that Manchester United really like and is very high in their thinking. So if we're saying dream world, I'm sure Manchester United would love to sign Carlos Baleba and Elliot Anderson, but there'll be competition for both of those players, and price may be a factor, which is why getting the money for Champions League football is important. And then the last thing I would say, and I think we need a whole show to go into the new financial rules, but it might be worth touching upon a little bit later. But in essence, Manchester United, because they have high income, will have more rope to work with when the financial rules change. So if they're to sign someone in January, they have to think about PSR in this financial year. If they wait until the summer, until after the World Cup as well, then you move into the squad cost ratio rules, and that will benefit Manchester United. And even without Champions League football, they may feel they've got more leeway to spend and still not be in breach of the rules. And there's kind of, and I'm oversimplifying this, but I'm sure the audience don't want to be sent to sleep. There's almost a free hit year. And I know this will get taken out of context on social media, but the so-called levies or fines that come into play if you breach the new squad cost ratio rules start in 2027, 2028. So 26, 27, you've got like a transitional year to get up to speed with the rules, and teams may intentionally go over the limit, knowing there's also an extra 30% threshold as well, get a lot of their signings done, and then know that the slaps on the wrist and potential sporting sanctions don't come into play until 27, 28. So it's actually a really good year and a really good change of financial rules for Manchester United, who I expect to be one of the major beneficiaries. And as a result, come summer, don't be surprised if we do see a significant spend and a midfield revamp. But of course, getting Champions League football will help.
Yeah, I mean, just on the back of that, one, very exciting because we know that we're going to need to spend quite a bit of money on the midfield and I would say other areas as well, which I will ask you about. But just on two of the targets there. First of all, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about Baleba. You're consistently saying he's his top target for Manchester United. There's a lot of reports are putting out there. But my question would be, do you have any idea, and this is no disrespect to the player because I know he was fantastic last year, but do you have any idea why Manchester United are still so hung up on Baleba, considering this season and still ongoing, I've been watching him, he's nowhere near the level that he was last year and isn't, in my opinion, playing like a Manchester United standard player. Do Manchester United just have faith in him? Why are they still so passionate about that signing?
Yeah, I think because their data-driven approach doesn't just look at last season, it looks at projections as well. Let's not forget, he's only 21 years of age. I don't remember Newcastle United fans being so excited about Elliot Anderson that they were screaming into their laptops when he departed. Of course, they wanted to keep him, and he's Newcastle through and through by birth. But you look at the progression of Elliot Anderson in the last kind of 6 to 12 months, and you go, wow. I think about Declan Rice in his last maybe 18 months at West Ham, suddenly adding attacking output. And now at Arsenal, he's consistent. You think about Moises Caicedo, and when he first joined Chelsea, he didn't have a first strong 12 months. And now he's arguably the best midfielder in his position in the Premier League. So I think Manchester United are calm about Baleba's current form because of his age, because I think he had a little bit of a niggle at the beginning of the season. Sometimes a player's head can be turned and it can affect their start to the season. And they're looking at data as he develops, only being 21, and thinking in our system and at our club, he can grow into a world-class midfielder. So when you're that young, you have such a steep potential upward curve of improvement that to take 12 Premier League appearances now and go, wait, he's not who we thought he was, versus looking at all of last season, all the data and all the projections. I think this is why Manchester United still feel that Carlos Baleba could be a very special signing for the football club. But maybe a more pertinent question is, will his current form, were it to continue all the way through to next summer, impact Manchester United's perspective on, is the price worth the player? Because if he has a standout season between now and the summer and it's in excess of £100 million, then you maybe go, okay, he's worth it. But if Brighton's price rises that high into British transfer record territory and he has a 38-game season that doesn't warrant that, that's when Manchester United might say, we still like the player, but he's simply not value for money, at which point you have to explore other targets.
Interesting. And then on Elliot Anderson, I also wanted to ask about, who would be Manchester United's competition, do you think, for Elliot Anderson come the summer? One, I think it is crucial we get Champions League, but would that be the case with him? And is there any other clubs in that race so far?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating question. And competition-wise, there's not as many as maybe 2 summers ago that are looking for a number 6 in Anderson's position. Of course, he can break into 8 as well. He's so versatile. I wouldn't even give him a position. I think he's just box-to-box, high octane. I covered Nottingham Forest 3-0 win at Anfield, and they were sensational. And Anderson was even getting into wide areas defensively and still not only winning the ball, but able to start attacks from deep when he just looked in a hole. So he's such a composed and calm player. And obviously, when you think about someone like that, certain clubs that don't have need at the moment might just say he's worth it for our long-term project. So even though we didn't think Elliot Anderson's position was as high a priority, we're just going to enter the race. But if you look at who's going to add a midfielder in summer 2026, along with Manchester United, I think Tottenham are going to be ones to watch. They're almost certainly going to add another central midfielder. Newcastle could be another club, although sources around St James's Park at the moment are kind of steering away from re-signing Elliot Anderson, but you can never say never. And there's no buyback clause for Newcastle United, but they might be there, and a potential rival as well. I'm told Bayern from outside of the Premier League. Liverpool could look to add another midfielder in summer 2026 as well. So those are probably the main clubs at this stage. I think Manchester City are not discounting a deeper lying midfielder as well once we get to the end of this season. So there'll be plenty of competition for Elliot Anderson, but I do expect Manchester United to be there and one of the clubs in the mix. And like I said before, they just have to, at the moment, balance several targets and work out, do they want to do anything in January? And if not, my expectation is 2 senior midfielders will arrive in summer 2026.
Yeah, I had a feeling City might enter that race, you know, looking at their squad, and just like the same way they did with Declan Rice when it was them versus Arsenal in that transfer saga. But I agree with you, when a player's that good, there's bound to be clubs interested. So again, more important that we get Champions League football. Rob Always United has asked, are we looking at any wing-backs? I know this is a big one for United fans at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, wing-backs has always been on the list. We've said this in previous shows. I'm not aware of any developing new target at this stage, but it's a position where I expect Manchester United to strengthen. I think by the end of the summer 2026 window, they'll have a wing-back, possibly versatile, that can play on both sides. Some feel, fan-wise, that I speak to, they need a right-sided wing-back. Others, a left. I think left was what they looked at last summer with Pervis Estupiñán going to Milan and Manchester United not making a bid, but he was certainly under consideration. So possibly left-sided wing-back, and maybe, like we've said on previous shows, it's a centre-back, left-back type profile as well, which is something that Arsenal have added in recent windows to relatively strong effect. So there's left-sided wing-back maybe, but possibly someone that can play both sides. I know we've spoken before in previous shows about Man Utd at Crystal Palace and also Anthony Robinson at Fulham. And yes, Manchester United like both of those profiles, but age may be a consideration because by the time you get to summer of 2026, there may be a year or two older than Manchester United would ideally like to go for in the market. But both, of course, come with proven Premier League experience, which is something that Ruben Amorim certainly craves. And I think the manager's perspective in recruitment meetings will be just find me instant players that can be dropped straight into a Premier League starting lineup. But next summer might be the first window when Christopher Vivell in particular really puts his foot down and uses his authority to say, we've got some Premier League experience already. Now we've got to buy a little bit younger. And then, of course, the midfield revamp and a young number 9 are the main areas, I'm told, where Manchester United will strengthen. And then we'll wait and see whether they enter the race for Antoine Semenyo as well, whether in January or the summer. And he would have the ability to play as a winger, forward, number 10, or even potentially a left wing back as well.
Yeah, I mean, Antoine Semenyo seems to be a name that keeps coming up. And just to clarify, because there's been a little bit of mixed reporting, Man United in the race, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've said before that Manchester United's interest in Antoine Semenyo is ongoing. Whether that's January or the summer, we'll have to ultimately reserve judgment on. I think the Semenyo clause will be a bit like a domino effect, where there may be clubs secretly hoping that he stays at Bournemouth for the season. they can assess at the end of the season and then move in the summer when the release clause diminishes a little bit. But if one club comes in, then everybody else has to move. And don't be surprised also with Antoine Semenyo if we get clarity in the month of December, not January, because my understanding is that the 65 million clause is only available in the early part of the window, so between 10 and 14 days. And that gives Bournemouth the chance, if he goes via the clause, to find a replacement. Now, usually when you have a clear-cut clause and the terms, therefore, are very transparent, if a side really wants Semenyo, they won't be focusing on the Bournemouth side or trying to negotiate around it, because that clause is market value. In fact, it's excellent value for a player in Semenyo's form. So what clubs will be doing in the month of December is going to Semenyo and seeing whether he wants to go mid-season. And I think for the right club, the answer there will be yes. And then trying to persuade him on their project. And if they get that player buy-in, you've almost got a pre-agreement, and you can go to Bournemouth and tell them in December, we're going to trigger the clause. And this is what Liverpool could do. Let's see. I think Liverpool may have to make a determination between whether they want Semenyo in January or a new centre-back. It's not a given that both happen. And for Manchester United, I know we've heard some reports that their interest is purely historical. That's not my understanding. I'm told that Manchester United's interest in Semenyo is ongoing. Let's see if they choose to enter the race, because he's kind of a priority player in some ways, but not in a priority position. So do they back off and say, we don't really need another winger at this point? Or do they say, we've either got to get him now or we're going to miss out to somebody else? So I think that's an internal conversation. But I think Manchester United's interest in Antoine Semenyo is ongoing, not purely historical. And I stand by that reporting, whether they sign him or don't sign him. And then Liverpool are the early front runners. Man City could be there because Pep Guardiola's looking for a different kind of winger, somebody that can give him attacking output, not just old school winger attributes, but unlike a Oscar Bob, Jeremy Doku, Savinho, can get 10 plus goals across the season. And Semenyo falls into that category. So they're ones to watch as well. And then Spurs and possibly Arsenal, the other clubs to keep an eye on.
Let's see what happens. Would be a very, very exciting signing. But Man United have got a lot of positions that fans feel like need strengthening first. But I do feel like in the attack, we are still a little bit light, especially if you're looking towards European football next season. But let's see. Thank you, Ben, for that update.
Going to AFCON as well.
Yeah, exactly. Ahmad and Bumo.
And Brian and Bumo.
They're our best players. What are we going to do? But just in terms of like young players, you were speaking about the data-driven approach before. I saw this report earlier, and I just wanted to get some clarity on it. And it was that Manchester United are determined to replace Harry Maguire with young centre-back Jeremy Jaquet, who is considered one of the best young centre-backs in the world. Have you heard anything about this 20-year-old centre-back Jeremy Jaquet?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, he's one of the hot prospects in world football at the moment in his position. And it would be very normal for Manchester United, like several other clubs, to be looking at him. He's 20 years old at the moment and he's playing for Rennes. And he's been very integral so far this season. I think he's played in something like 13 games and he's equally as comfortable as a left-sided or a right-sided centre-back. He only signed a new contract at the beginning of the summer, so it's not a given that he'll be able to leave in summer 2026, and he's contracted, I believe, until 2029. So the idea that it's an easy signing or it's a cheap one, I would caution against. But he could be somebody that Manchester United look at. I know that they were keeping a close eye also on Upamecano and his future. That's the kind of profile they like. Diamande as well at Sporting, another one who in every single window has just been way too expensive because Sporting just pointed towards the release clause. But I think the price will drop there in summer 2026 as well. So Manchester United will have options. But I come back to what I said before. It's really easy in reporting to just go, there's this name. And then everyone goes away and thinks, brilliant, that's the name that we're going to sign. Now the picture's a lot clearer. I don't think Manchester United are at that point yet. I think before we can say who the defensive targets are, they're making a determination on, number one, is Maguire staying or going? And that will inform whether they finally offer him a formal extension. Then number 2, do we want wing-back, centre-back? Do we want Maguire Air? Do we want left-back, centre-back and kill 2 birds with 1 stone? And if Maguire stays, they'll almost certainly go younger. So then you are looking at potentially profiles like Jeremy Jaquet. Or if Maguire goes, perhaps they want to make a more experienced kind of signing. And this is where maybe with Champions League football, they decide to try and enter the race for a player like Mark Gay, even though other clubs have been mentioned to date about potentially securing his signature. So what I've just explained is kind of the stage of recruitment meetings that Manchester United's hierarchy are in. And usually it is smarter at this stage of the year to isolate the profile and the age bracket first. And there's some internal considerations that will inform that. And then if you're not going to do it in January, you're spending January to about March, then creating your shortlist. And that's when we'll have more clarity over specific names.
Thank you. Very exciting. I like all them names that you put forward. So hopefully one of them, because they
Some
all
of them are difficult though, like Upamecano, for example, no guarantee that he moves anywhere.
To be fair, that would, no disrespect to Upamecano, I'd still take him, but he'd be maybe towards the back end of the list. I like the idea of Diamande, I like the idea of Matt Gay. They would be really hard targets to go and secure. I am aware of that, but I definitely think it's an area United need to invest in. And then just to kind of pivot the position a little bit, there was some murmurs that Ivan Toney might be looking to return to the Premier League in order to try and get into Thomas Tuchel's England squad. I know that you have a lot of knowledge regarding the Saudi Pro League. Is there any truth in that? And Man United, with the striker situation, I mean, we're desperate to bring someone on against Everton. Sesko's injured, Xerxes sort of halfway house between a number 10 and a striker. Would there be any interest in Ivan Toney?
Yeah, I mean, as we've said on previous shows, if an opportunistic name like Toney becomes available and he's affordable, which would likely be a loan with some kind of wage coverage from Al Ahly, then potentially Manchester United could consider a profile like that. There's lots of Premier League clubs that like Ivan Toney. Tottenham would be another one with the Thomas Frank connection. West Ham, if they don't succeed in Joshua Zirkzee, might enter the fray there. But it's far more complicated than people have reported. So, as I said a few weeks ago, and now he's gone on record and confirmed my exclusive, Rui Pedro Braz, who is the new sporting director at Al Ahly, is adamant that Ivan Toney is going nowhere. And those are his words now, not just my reporting. He's come out publicly and said Al Ahly are not looking to do anything with Ivan Toney. And the only way that's going to change in January is if Toney left and Al Ahly got a really important foreign striker. And that, of course, could be very difficult in the 6 months leading up to the World Cup. Before Al Ahly signed Ivan Toney, they had half lined up Victor Osimhen, but the deal fell through. And of course, he's not going to go to Saudi now and has already sorted out his long-term future. And Richarlison was the other name. And Richarlison was actually the top target ahead of both Toney and Osimhen. But he told Saudi dealmakers at the time he was not prepared to go to Saudi Arabia before the 2026 World Cup, and now he's playing regularly for Spurs. So forgetting who wants Ivan Toney, you got to deal with Al Ahly, and you got a new sporting director that doesn't want him to go, and they would have to find a replacement. Add to the fact that players that leave Saudi on loan, if they've been in the Premier League, that want to avoid tax because they've not been in Saudi for 2 full years, they have to go outside of England usually to get a workaround. So Jordan Henderson, when he left Al Ittihad, didn't return to the Premier League directly. He went to Ajax, and some of the consideration about rejecting Premier League offers was for tax reasons, because if you loan back, you're spending too many days in the UK, you're going to get hit with a big tax bill. And it was exactly the same with John Duran as well, who got loaned to Turkey and again didn't return to the Premier League because he'd have got a giant tax bill as well. So Toney says he's settled in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be difficult financially for him to return to the UK if he cares about the money staying tax-free. And as a result, I think there will be interest in Ivan Toney in January, but it's going to be really complicated to get him away from Al Ahly.
Interesting stuff. And then with the Xerxes situation, is there anything around that and maybe any other strikers that Man United are looking at?
I've said before, Etta Ayong, but he can't move mid-season because he's played for Levante and Villarreal, but he remains a target for Manchester United. I think Arsenal could enter the race there. And it's fair to say that both Barcelona and Real Madrid like Etta Ayong. Some people compare him to the next Haaland. Player himself thinks he's a bit more similar to Harry Kane. So that might be one to watch for Manchester United in the summer rather than in January. It wouldn't surprise me if no striker arrives and Xerxes just stays. But of course, if Xerxes departs, then they will want to bring in another forward, especially with Bryan Mbeumo going off to the African Cup of Nations. So then coming back to Xerxes, that's the challenge when you spell it all out, that if Manchester United can't find a forward, and in the context of Xerxes potentially going and Mbeumo off to AFCON, the kind of name that they would want would be somebody more established. Otherwise, you may as well just promote Chido Obi and you've already got a young striker there. So Xerxes is in a really challenging position. The same for Kobbie Mainoo, because almost certainly in the next few weeks, Josh Xerxes is going to go to the Manchester United hierarchy and say very clearly, I want to go out on loan because I fear for my World Cup place with the Netherlands. And Manchester United are going to turn around and say exactly what they said to Kobbie Mainoo over the summer, that we want to keep you. You already played in the last game when there was an injury and we lacked squad depth if we let you go. And this is the most challenging thing for Xerxes, that Ruben Amorim likes Xerxes as a squad player and knows he offers something a bit different to the other forwards. And Xerxes not going to get any favours, therefore, from Manchester United with the World Cup in mind. So the domino effect for Xerxes to leave has to be, number one, he pushes very hard. Number two, Manchester United find a replacement in January. There's not that many out there. And then number three, someone's got to be able to afford Joshua Xerxes, even on a loan with a high wage. West Ham, as I've said before, could be one possibility, but it all depends on whether Manchester United can find the perfect mid-season replacement. And there's just as much chance, I'm told, that no striker arrives for Manchester United in January, and Joshua Xerxes has to sit tight and remains a Manchester United player in the second half of the season.
And then just looking ahead to the summer, I mean, I can't believe I'm even saying this because if United carry on the way they are, I doubt we'd be able to attract a player like this, but you never know if you get Champions League football. Any updates on the Harry Kane situation?
Well, Harry Kane's situation is interesting because the release clause that diminishes to 65 million euros has to be triggered in January for the summer. And were it to be triggered or matched, it might even be done secretly, because Harry Kane is speaking very clearly that he loves Bayern, that he's only focused on Bayern, that he might extend at Bayern, that he might even stay beyond 2027 at Bayern, and that his international focus is, of course, on the World Cup. And that's Harry Kane, the media-trained model professional. And I can guarantee you, whether something is happening or not, Kane will continue to say publicly he's only focused on Bayern and it's the best move of his career. Whether we can read into everything Kane says as 100% truth, let's see. Because still at the back of Kane's mind, I'm told, is breaking Alan Shearer's goal-scoring record. And as a consequence, he'll need minimum 2 seasons back in the Premier League at peak level. And it's a push, I think, to leave in summer 2027 and break that Alan Shearer record. So there's sort of this odd paradox with Kane, where on the one hand, there's a wait and see because of what Kane's saying publicly, because of the World Cup, and due to the fact that, perversely, if he won the Champions League this season at Bayern, he'll have kind of filled his bingo card, and then maybe we'll decide it's best to go and have another challenge. If he doesn't win anything with Bayern this season, he might think, I'm scoring, I'm in form, I'm settled, I'll just stay for minimum 1 extra year. So that's the wait and see aspect. But then if somebody wants to trigger the clause and test whether Kane privately is saying the same things as he's saying publicly about loyalty to Bayern, they're going to have to do that in January. And as a result, we might get a bit more clarity unexpectedly on Harry Kane mid-season, even though any potential move, if it happens, will only be the summer. And yes, Manchester United, if they go for a more experienced name, could enter the conversation for Harry Kane. But I think if it all goes according to plan with Benjamin Sesko, then Xerxes was to depart in the summer 2026. You might find that Manchester United, if they don't want to stifle the pathway of Chido Obi, say to a player like Etta Young, there's not quite the right space in our squad for you, because that's a long-term investment. Chido Obi's a long-term investment. Benjamin Sesko is a long-term investment. They're all kind of fighting against each other in the same age bracket. And this is why I think that if Benjamin Sesko gets going and Chido Obi's pathway continues to remain open, maybe in the summer 2026, Manchester United do look for a slightly short-termist, more established name. They come, they go, they spend 2-3 years at a club, and then you still have the ability for somebody like Chido Obi to come through and Benjamin Sesko to have a long-term future at the club. So don't discount a more box office and established name, because if they just go and sign another young striker in summer 2026, they're all fighting against each other and they're in a similar age bracket.
Interesting stuff. I mean, speaking of Bundesliga, remember tomorrow on That's Football, Friday night, Mönchengladbach versus Leipzig, and it is a 7:30 kickoff live match on That's Football with Goldbridge. Make sure you are there. And then Sunday, the big one, Crystal Palace versus Manchester United on the United Stand. 10 a.m. we are live from the United Stand studio, followed by Goldbridge's watch along, and then on Sunday, Chelsea versus Arsenal at 4:15. So hopefully you're buzzing off a United win, and then you get to watch Chelsea versus Arsenal. That'd be a big game. 4:15 we are live, 4:30 kickoff. Exciting weekend ahead. We're going to ask you for your predictions soon, Ben.
Got to think. It's so hard.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Well, you have a think about it. While you're thinking about it, I just got a couple last questions. First one is there any injury updates on Cunha or Sesko, do you know?
So Sesko, nothing major to add at this point. And obviously, from Manchester United's perspective, they'll want him back sooner rather than later. But it's a chance, isn't it, for Joshua Zirkzee to potentially get a mini run in the side. We saw that Sesko went straight down the tunnel in that 2-2 draw against Tottenham, and it was a knee injury. So it's not usually one that you want to rush a player back from. And then Ruben Amorim, I think, said in his last press conference from memory, the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, that he'd be out for at least a few weeks. So at the moment, we're looking at early or mid-December there. It's not so serious that he's going to be out until January and miss all the festive fixtures, but I doubt he'll be back in the matchday squad for Crystal Palace, but no major update on that one. With Cunha, I think there's a fair chance that he will be back in the squad. So as I revealed when the injury broke, it's a head problem, and I think Cunha basically jumped up in training and was pretty much knocked out cold. I don't want to sensationalize it and say that he was unconscious or anything like that, but he took a really significant blow to the head and then was rested as a precautionary measure, and no doubt went through, therefore, concussion protocol. But if everything goes according to plan there, hopefully he does stand a chance of being back for Crystal Palace. But no major update on each of them. I think we just have to wait for Ruben Amorim and his press conference. But certainly from Cunha's point of view, it was referred to as a minor injury and a precautionary measure to keep him out of the Everton game.
Brilliant, thank you. And then my other one before I ask you for your predictions is Marcus Rashford. There were some reports earlier that Barcelona want to follow through with purchasing Marcus Rashford at the end of the season, but they could face some competition with PSG. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, I think PSG and Rashford seems to have rumbled on forever. And what I would say on PSG is before Rashford extended at Manchester United, the Rashford camp, including Rashford in person, met with the PSG president, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, and they were really angry with the Rashford camp because they felt their club was being used as a game and that Rashford never had any intention to move to Paris, and it was all just about leverage so he could go back to Manchester United with a rival offer. Yes, it is true that PSG are likely to add a versatile attacker in 2026, but PSG sources continue to downplay the idea that they are moving at this stage to try and sign Marcus Rashford. So they like the player, long-standing relationship with Nasser Al-Khelaifi, but suggestions that they'll gazump the option to buy and offer, I think the report said £50 million. That specific detail is denied by sources that I speak to at PSG, and pretty strenuously. And when there's an option to buy, any suitor's going to use that as market valuation, knowing also that Manchester United want Rashford to leave permanently and ultimately want the wage off the books. So why would a sensible club like PSG offer 15, 20 million above the option to buy to allegedly blow Barcelona out the water? But you don't need to do that. Barcelona are going to weigh up at the end of the season. Have they got the long-term wage and have they got the fee to sign Marcus Rashford? And if they go down that route, whether triggering the option to buy or negotiating a different deal with Manchester United, they know that Marcus Rashford is going to pick Barcelona regardless of what PSG does, because Rashford wants Barcelona, Barcelona want Rashford in an ideal world. And if everything aligns, PSG can do absolutely nothing. If it doesn't align with Barca's finances, they simply won't be able to do the deal. And then any club coming in is just going to look at the option to buy. They're not going to suddenly offer Manchester United 20 million more with a year left on the contract. So the notion PSG are moving and are going to outbid Barca is downplayed by people I speak to. And then regarding the option to buy, I think there's a few games going on because it's at arguably lower than Rashford's current market value. But of course, if you're Barcelona, knowing Manchester United want a permanent solution, they may well hesitate on triggering the option to buy, which I'm told is not as high as the 35 or 40 million euros that has been spoken about. I'm told the option to buy for Marcus Rashford is 30 million euros, possibly with some conditional add-ons on top, taking it a little bit higher. So for Barca to say we want lower than that, it undermines the fact that everyone knows he's doing very well and growing in valuation. But I think what Barca will likely do is try something out of a tactic at lower than the option to buy, which is very normal, especially this far out from the summer. And then if Rashford keeps doing well and they fail to get that lower number, which I think is very likely because Manchester United can tell his value is growing, they will then, if they can get all of their ducks in a row, come back to the option to buy. And if they get to the point where they want to trigger the option to buy, nobody can rival Barcelona in this race because Marcus Rashford wants to stay permanently at Barcelona. The only thing that can undo the deal is poor form in the second half of the season that makes Barca second take, or poor finances that don't allow Barca to get the deal done. And if that happens, the door becomes open to other suitors. But if it doesn't, Marcus Rashford is only going to end up at one place if Barca choose to get a deal done. And that is at the Camp Nou, because he always wanted Barcelona, even when he was on loan at Aston Villa, and that still remains the case.
Thank you very much. A very good update there from you, Ben. And to feel like I've got all the info on that now, we'll see what happens going into the summer there. There's a question here from MUFC MPB, which is a question for Ben. Are there any young talents in South America that United are currently looking at? Any new names to keep an eye on?
Nothing that I'm really aware of that's new at this stage. I think that Manchester United under Christopher Vivell in particular, but Kyle McCauley will probably play a role in this too. Definitely going to put a heavy emphasis on the South and Central American regions. And that's obviously what we've seen Arsenal do historically, and now Chelsea as well. So let's see whether they unearth other talents, but it's not like a new strategy because Diego Leon already arrived and was scouted from Paraguay, and some other sort of top talents maybe that are in Europe at the moment, particularly in places like France, maybe originally started their careers in South America and will be known in the long run to Manchester United as well. So I think you'll have like a twofold strategy here where there'll be the need in summer 2026 to go with established players in midfield and likely at wing back, and then the consideration that I've outlined before about what kind of profile and age of number 9. And that's all about Manchester United now. But once they're happy with that and the revamps they've done over the last few windows, then the longer term planning by Christopher Vivell, Jason Wilcox, who's got a no 9 for talent, and Kyle McCauley will be about finding players that they can pre-sign that are maybe only 16 or 17 and can join when they're 18 or are in that 18 to 21 age bracket but are not for the now. And that caliber and profile of players will be all over the field because they'll have potentially 1 to 5 years to develop. maybe before they get significant first-team opportunities. This is where, along with Europe, South America is obviously an important region, not just for Manchester United, but most of the big six clubs. So I think Manchester United will put heavy emphasis and resources into South America, and Kyle McCauley, in his new role, will play a part in that.
Cool, thank you very much for that, Ben. And also, EG4701, I don't know what he thinks your answer is going to be to this one. I don't know if you've already seen it. What's the club thought on the coach system that plays 90% of outfield players out of position? Fullbacks playing as wingback, 10s playing as a DM, wingers playing as wingbacks or 10s?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ruben Amorim is staunchly loyal to his system, but within the system, you have a lot of variation and rotation that, when it's not going right, has kind of baffled Manchester United fans. My thoughts on Ruben Amorim in the Premier League, and it's possibly still a learning for him, is that his game management has come under question. So I don't personally look at the system and think there's anything wrong with it. Although I've said before, I'm not a manager, so it's a little bit ridiculous for me to take too much of a tactical opinion. But I remember looking at the Manchester derby in particular and thinking Man City's 4-1 setup would be perfect for the players at Manchester United's disposal. But Ruben Amorim and the hierarchy back the system. So for me, there's no issue with that. But the challenge, I think, is how can he tweak it in game management situations to change a game? So you 1-0 down to Everton, they've got 10 men. And I don't think Amorim did enough in terms of his substitutions and his game management to realise, how do we go for the jugular here and win a game that everybody now expects us to do so? And they were ultimately therefore undone by a very good goal from Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. I also think that if you sign Cunha and Mbeumo as 10s, then it's perfectly normal that Bruno Fernandes would have a deeper role. But if that's not working, the Casemiro-Bruno Fernandes partnership, and it hasn't always done so, then I think you have to be able to say to Cunha or Mbeumo, Cunha can go wide left or number 9, Mbeumo can potentially lead the line or move into a wider area, allowing Bruno Fernandes to break in behind the striker. And when you're against 10 men, you don't have to worry as much about being out-battled or dominated in the centre of the park. Everton were obviously parking the bus. They were playing a really deep block. So then you kind of start to think to yourself, Mbeumo can have the freedom to go slightly wider or right up top, and Ahmad can do the same. And as a result, they're not both in a 10 position. So then they're creating a gap, which means Bruno Fernandes can break forwards and Casemiro can be more rigid, or you take him off and you bring on a Kobbie Mainoo like he did, but too late in the game. And then you've got somebody with a bit more legs and pace to cover because you're taking a gamble because Bruno Fernandes can break forward. So then you're almost playing a sort of 3-3-3-1, which I think is the formation personally he should have moved to against Everton in order to try and get back into the game and ultimately win it. But what I would say is that that's just my opinion, having watched football. And I'm a journalist, not a trained coach. So I think we have to be a little bit cautious and respectful and say Ruben Amorim, as a trained coach, obviously has a rhyme and a reason for his selection, but it does appear that in game management situations, so not talking about the broader formation, not talking about the starting 11, but in game management, when he's 60 minutes into a game and they'd have to protect a lead or get back into a match, those are the parts of the games, both in terms of system tweaks and substitutions, where personally, and it is only my view, I'm questioning him.
Ben, get you in the dugout. Get you in the dugout. I've heard enough. You've passed the interview.
You spell it out like 3-3-3-1. I'm not sure anybody's ever played that formation that I can think of. So perhaps I'm talking nonsense, but I like the idea of a 3-3-3-1. Maybe it lacks a bit of width. Who knows? I can
be your assistant manager if you want. We'll do it together.
I don't know if they can afford me. They definitely can't afford you.
Got some last super chats in. Sorry about the questions I didn't manage to get to, but I'll definitely do them on the next show from MK. Any news and experienced strikers such as Mateta? We did speak a little bit about Kane, but I'll speak about that on the next show.
Mateta, by the way, just briefly, even though we hear about a new Palace contract, and that is definitely the club's intent, the player's a little bit reluctant to sign at this point. Maybe as you get the halfway point of the season and he sees what Palace may have, he might change his mind. So don't rule out a new Mateta deal. The reports that broke about Mateta signing a new contract or being engaged in talks are accurate, but he hasn't signed yet. The only thing I'm getting steered away from is maybe Mateta going from Palace to another Premier League club. So if he was to leave, and it is an if, and he doesn't sign that new deal, I think Serie A might be the most likely destination.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Ben. Tom McBride said when he was at Lisbon, he didn't have to defend. Premier League is definitely a more difficult league, but...
Yeah, but by the way, when he was playing against Everton, he didn't have to defend either.
That's true. That's true, Ben. That's true. Daniel Thompson says, hope you're well. The United stand, Beth, Ben, great show as always. Thank you so much, Daniel. Really appreciate your support. See you in the comments all the time. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. And everyone tuning in as well, smash a like on the video if you've not already. Get your comments in. I do read them after the show. I want to hear your opinions, any future questions for Ben as well. And remember, before you go, that the Christmas jumper is linked in the description below. Make sure you go and get it. As we're getting into December, we're going to be showing it off a little bit more often, so make sure you have yours to match with us on here as well. And then, Ben, finally, I look forward to this every single week, your prediction for Manchester United versus Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park on Sunday, 12 kickoff. That is 12 midday kickoff. It's an early one. Yeah,
usually, even though you look forward to my predictions, for this one, I have to say, hand on heart, Palace 2, Manchester United 1. That would have been my go-to prediction because Palace are flying at the moment. However, and not just because I'm on a Manchester United podcast, or maybe because I'm on a Manchester United podcast, I'm going for 2-2 in this game. And the reason why I'm giving Manchester United a point is partly because I expect a response after Everton. But remember, one thing in Manchester United's advantage is that tonight at 8 p.m, Crystal Palace have to play Strasbourg, fly back, and then, as you say, they've got that early kickoff against Manchester United that follows, albeit on the Sunday, but it's still not that much turnaround going from an 8 p.m. in France on a Thursday to a Sunday lunch kickoff. And I think Manchester United will have the opportunity to maybe get something from the game because possibly Crystal Palace will be a little bit hungover from their Europa Conference League game against Strasbourg. So 2-2.
2-2. You heard it here first. I wish I was that optimistic. I hope you're right. I want us to go and win, but Palace is a really tough place to go and they are flying at the moment. Let's see what happens. Get your predictions in down below as well. I just see 12 o'clock on a Sunday away at Selhurst and I think that's not Manchester United's cup of tea, that one. But I feel like I've had all the positivity sucked out of me recently. I do want to back us to win. So let's see what happens. Thank you anyway, Ben. Really do appreciate all the updates there. Excited to get into the January window when it does happen. Not long away now, but we've got Christmas to look forward to beforehand. So remember, Christmas jumpers, link in the description. But yeah, thank you for all of your updates and insights today. Thank you everybody for watching the show. Smash a like if you've not already. And yeah, we'll catch up on the next one, Ben.
Look forward to it.